Okay, welcome to you all, good afternoon, and welcome to the jobs.ac.uk webinar on CVs. I'm Elizabeth Wilkinson, and I'm going to be hosting today's webinar, but I'm also joined by Dr. Holly Prescott and Dr. Louise Bamford, and we'll start out with some brief introductions from the three of us, but then we really want to focus on your questions, either the ones which have been submitted beforehand or on the YouTube channel as we go through this webinar. So, quick introduction from me. I'm the careers consultant at University of Manchester who works on supporting postgraduates, both those who postgrads who want to go into industry or who want to go into academia. And prior to that, I spent many years in industry, working in a range of technical and management roles, but particularly working in HR roles and recruitment roles. So I can give you a recruiter's perspective on what we're hoping to see from your CV. Okay, so Holly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks Elizabeth. So my name's Holly. I'm the careers advisor for postgraduate researchers at the University of Birmingham. So day in, day out, I'm working with PhD researchers and also sometimes postdocs as well on their career plans and advice for them. My background, I did a PhD in literature and cultural geography at the University of Birmingham. Never left, and I've worked in a variety of roles there, including student recruitment and career support. So hopefully can help to answer your questions this afternoon. Oh, and I'm coming to you live from our second bedroom in the Jewellery Quarter in Birmingham.
Great. Okay, thanks Holly. So Louise, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello, my name's Louise Bamford, and just before we went into quarantine, I joined Brunel University London as the careers consultant in a new role supporting doctoral and postdoctoral researchers. Previously, I'd had a general careers advisor role at the University of Westminster, but with particular responsibility for looking after doctoral researchers there as well. So quite a few years of working with doctoral researchers. Prior to that, I studied chemistry, did a bachelor's and then a PhD, and then joined the consumer goods company Procter & Gamble in working in new product development on healthcare products, so rather different. So basically, you know, I've had personal experience of moving from doctoral research into industry and then back into professional services. So, yeah, really learned the importance of talking to your audience and how to tailor a CV. And I guess the only other thing to mention was I've sat on recruitment panels both for Procter & Gamble and at the University of Westminster, and I'd say, you know, what's interesting is despite the very different roles and institutions, the process is virtually the same, and the principles that make a good application are the same wherever you're looking. So really excited to be able to share some core principles with you today. And I'm sitting in my front bedroom in just northwest of London.
Okay, well, I'm coming to you from my sunroom in rural Cheshire. We're hoping that the dogs don't kick off next door. If they do, I'll be muting myself and handing over to Holly and Louise. Okay, so let's kick off wherever you are listening out there. One of the questions which came through before we went live today was just general tips for CVs when applying for higher education. So I thought I'd just start out with one of the most important things which I think people need to know is that academic CVs are radically different to non-academic CVs. And one of the most important differences is how long a CV should be. And I do find that even seasoned researchers aren't necessarily aware of this. There's lots of information out there, particularly on the internet, talking about 2-page CVs maximum and so on. There are no absolute rules, but there are conventions, what's seen as normal. And conventional wisdom in non-academic CVs, certainly in the UK, is that 2 pages is pretty much the norm. There are exceptions, but two pages is normal. For academic CVs, it's really quite different. 35 pages with an index is perfectly acceptable for an experienced academic. You know, ask your supervisors and your PIs to have a look at their CVs. You will be shocked. So I think that's my one general thing, which is don't take things which are applicable outside academia for being the same for academic CVs. So that's my kind of one starting tip. But we've had some other jobs. I think we probably want to start with some other questions. We want to start with one question which came in which is saying, I'm looking for my first job, need to write a CV. Where do I start? What's the most important thing to write in it? And I'd like to hand over to Holly here to have a go at that one.
Yeah, sure. So so you're looking for first job, and need to write a CV. Where do you start? What's the most important thing to write in it? So I'm going to come at this from a slightly unusual angle, and rather than offer a straight answer, I'm going to ask you to think about the question you're asking there. So I want you to imagine that instead of writing a CV, you're writing an advertisement. Pardon me. So you've been tasked with writing an advertisement. And if that happened, I'm guessing that your first question wouldn't be, what do I put in the advertisement? It would be, who's my audience? And what am I selling? And what's the most important information about what I'm selling for my audience? And it's exactly the same when you're coming to write your CV. So I'm just going to try and share a little takeaway here if I can. So I'm going to come to this very quickly here. Sorry, just bear with me. So if you're grappling with that question of I'm writing a CV, what's important that I put in it? So rather than asking, what do I include? Think instead about asking, what does this recruiter want to know about me? So instead of thinking about your CV as just a list of stuff that you've done, think about it instead as a marketing document, and it's marketing you to a particular audience. So the more you know about your audience, the more you know about what they're looking for, what skills and experience they're looking for, and then ask yourself where in your own experience, your best examples of those skills and experience that they're looking for, then hopefully you'll start to have an answer as to what it should be that goes in your CV. I think that's the way that I would approach that question. I don't know if Elizabeth and Louise have anything else.
Louise, do you want to add anything into that at all?
No, absolutely. I think that's basically hit the nail on the head. You know, really think this CV is not your opportunity to tell them everything you want to tell them. It's very much the employer has a need. They have, it's basic consumer goods from my Procter & Gamble days. You know, what is the need and what's the reason to believe? So how can I be reassured that you can meet my need as an employer? So absolutely hit the nail on the head. And I think it's a very core principle that just runs through everything we're going to talk about today in terms of CVs. Yeah.
Okay, so that's talk about where do you start with your first job, but let's contrast it for CVs to later stage. And a specific question which came in was, after 14 years dedicated to neuroscience research, is it still possible to be accepted outside of the academy, outside of research? How do you shape your CV in order to be successful in this transition? Now, Louise, you've obviously done this, so do you want to bring your experience from going from industry to academia and inside and outside?
Yes, no, really happy to answer this question. And you know, I think it's a really important skill to learn, to be honest, because I think, you know, increasingly we're seeing many people throughout their working lives will make quite significant career changes, you know, as I have done, as you said, Elizabeth, I've done that several times now. You know, I think that's, you know, really valuable for the individual and also from the employer's point of view. I think employers are really waking up to the idea that they're really looking for a diversity of thinking and a diversity of how to do things. So if they can get people coming into different roles from different sorts of experience, then they're going to really gain so much more and have a different approach to things, and that can be really valuable from the employer's point of view as well. So I'd say, you know, if you're thinking about making a move out, looking at options and making a move outside academia, you know, really think about, you know, what do you have to offer? What kind of skills, experience do you have? You know, who might be interested in that? Because you'll have a lot of different things to offer. You'll have your subject expertise. There might be companies that are interested in your subject expertise, either in research or commercial. There'll be people who might be interested in your understanding of HE. Working as a careers advisor, it's really helpful to understand how HE works. There's lots of people like, you know, funders and research, you know, public policy, who, you know, understanding HE is really important. So lots of different things you might have to offer to a potential employer. I'm also going to try and share a slide as well. So here we go. Fantastic. Okay. And so this is my top tips in terms of, looking at targeting your CV outside research. And guess what? You just heard it from Holly and you're hearing it from me now as well. It's absolutely crucial that you spend some time really studying the role carefully. Think about what you would be doing. Think about, the context of the role. Who would you be working with? What are the objectives of the organisation? So what are they trying to do? And that way you're starting to get yourself into the position thinking at it from the employer's point of view. Then you might sort of map out how might you meet the requirements of that role. And then you're really into thinking about, well, okay, I know how to persuade someone I might be able to do this job. How am I going to organise that in my CV? And you might find you need some quite different sections. So you may find just a straightforward chronological, this is what I've done in order, isn't going to work so well. What you really want to do is maybe early on in your CV is draw particular attention to some specific sections. So it's really important that you have knowledge of neuroscience, for example, in this case. You might want to talk about that early on. You might have some particular methods you understand, some analysis tools, some particular skills you want to highlight. And you might do that in maybe a section called core capabilities, where you provide specific evidence that you have got the kind of core things. So it's almost like a mini supporting statement where you're really showing off, look, I've done the things you're looking for, and I can do these things. Alternatively, you might, invent a section. You might call it, I don't know, policy experience or, industrial collaborations. And again, put that early on in your CV. So you're really showing the employer you understand what they're looking for. And look, you're going to catch their eye quickly. You're going to show them the experience you've got that's going to be helpful. So, examples, being concise, but being specific. So really thinking about, what was the situation I was involved in? What did I do? What were the achievements? And really using the kind of language that employers outside of academia will be familiar with. So, you might use completely different language. You might say, I didn't say I presented a poster, but you might say, I've learned how to present my information in an engaging way to a range of stakeholders, that sort of thing. So it's really thinking about, as Holly said, exactly as Holly said, how am I going to grab the attention and reassure this person that I have got the core skills that they're looking for. So I don't know if you've got anything else you want to add, Holly or Elizabeth?
I think just to pick up on the last point you had on that slide there, Louise, which said use a language that the employer will understand. So if you have spent quite a lot of years in academia and then are looking to transition into industry, one of the most important things I think you can do is talk to people who work in the industry you'd like to work in, connect with them through LinkedIn and get used to how they talk about themselves. The key words. So for example, rather than saying that they write articles, you'll see things like concise report writing or things like that, and get to learn how they talk about themselves and how they describe their experience. And then the skill is to translate your academic experience into that language so that you're connecting with the person reading your CV in that sector.
I've got a really good tip from Chris Humphreys, who talks a lot about PhD careers, and he suggested listen to podcasts from the sector that you're trying to get into. Then you get to hear the kind of language and the terminology that they're all using naturally. I think that's a really excellent opportunity to try to get into the heads of where you're trying to get into if you're trying to get out of academia. Okay. Right, so let's go for our next section. I think there's going to be quite a few people who are maybe at the start of their academic career or non-academic career, particularly new PhD grads. Holly, have you got any advice for PhD students who are going to be passing this year?
Yeah, so I was aware that we might get asked about this in terms of the current climate and what's happening. Now I'm aware that a lot of my students are doing sterling jobs of going through virtual vivas and things like that at the moment, and I'm aware that kind of that can kind of take a bit of an emotional toll as well, because it's quite an anticlimax, isn't it, after all of this work that you've done to be defending your thesis without your examiner sat in front of you. So I think if you are passing your PhD this year, just try and be kind to yourself and think about, you know, you would be kind to someone else in your situation. So just remember to be kind to yourself as well, and think about what's practical for you. But I've had a lot of my students getting in touch with me over the past few weeks asking about this, like, what kind of job market am I going to be entering if I'm passing the PhD this year? So here's what I've been saying to them, and I hope this helps those people who've been asking us this question as well. So the first thing I would say is just be cautious and be aware of making any big longer term career decisions when you're experiencing high anxiety and when there are so many unknowns. And think about what you are in control of. So first of all, if you can, keep up to date with the information and the developments that are coming out at the moment. So for example, keep your eye on jobs.ac.uk for any articles and any advice coming out about anything that might be changing. For example, if you're worried about not being able to claim universal credit as a student, keep your eye on the news to see whether that changes. So just stay up to date. If possible, keep in touch with any employers or any PIs who you've already applied to. They might have paused recruitment for now, but that doesn't mean they're not going to pick it back up in the coming months. So stay in touch if you can. And if that isn't an option, or you might also want to think about flexing to the current situation. So if you're thinking about staying in academia, can you flex your research or your approach to help with the current situation? Quite a lot of organisations and funding bodies are pushing quite a lot of funding towards the COVID-19 effort. So stay up to date with them and what's being funded at the moment. And is there a way you can adapt and lend your skills and your research expertise to that effort as well, maybe take advantage of some of those extra resources. And that might mean collaborating with some colleagues as well. And then also think about, if you want to stay in academia but you're uncertain of the job market at the moment, try and keep a visible research profile. So thinking about updating your online profiles, and also think about how can you contribute positively to the research environment right now. So I've some of my students doing great things, like one of them started a video blog to support researchers in STEM who are usually lab-based but now might be working from home. So thinking about, even if it's not subject specific, is there some value you can add to the research community right now? Because that'll help to keep your profile up, keep you visible, and it'll give you a positive COVID-19 story to tell when you're hopefully be applying for jobs and being interviewed. And then the next, just another tip as well, so do have a look on jobs.ac.uk to see who's still recruiting, and to see which institutions, which universities, which labs do seem to be still recruiting. But in the meantime, think about, is there anything else you can offer? So, for example, is there any work you could do freelance at the moment? For example, tutoring, all of those school students who are having to work at home. Do you have expertise you could offer if you need interim work for freelancing activities like tutoring and so on? Well, most importantly, I would say these are extraneous circumstances. Absolutely understand if you are feeling anxious about it. My final word would be, remember, because of this situation, it's likely that the next work you take, the next step you take, won't be forever. It's your next step. It's not your end goal. I hope that helps.
Okay, right. Thanks very much, Holly. I mean, I think in the first week of lockdown, I did check the jobs.ac.uk site, and there were 230 new either postdoc or lecturing positions which were advertised even after lockdown. So although, yes, we know it's going to be a tight job market, it hasn't disappeared completely. Right, let's get back onto CVs in particular. Louise, a couple of you which might be useful. We've had some comments about people saying, I've got lots of work experience in different jobs within various sectors, struggle to fit it all on your CV. what's the best way to keep your work experience section of your CV short? And maybe kind of link this in with how do you, what kind of order should you put your various different skills in for either postdoc or industrial jobs?
Okay, great question. And I think, this can happen, as you get more experience in your career, you add a bit more section, then you think, oh, I want to talk about this experience and this experience. And I think, it's quite easy to let your CV just sort of grow and grow, particularly different work experiences. So I think, basically where we started from, which was really thinking about what is it you want someone to know about you once they've read your CV. So being really clear about what it is you want to communicate in your CV, and then thinking, well, okay, for these different experiences I've had, what are the main points that this employer would like to know about it? So there may be some experiences you think, yes, this is really relevant, this experience, this job, this educational degree, this is really crucial, and therefore you want to be putting that earlier in your CV, you want to be giving more depth to that area. So just because you've done a lot of different things doesn't mean to say you necessarily have to give each of them equal merit. So for example, when I moved from Procter & Gamble, I have to say that most of my time was spent developing new healthcare products. I haven't done any of that since I went into careers consultancy, obviously. But what I did do whilst at Procter & Gamble was I spent quite a bit of time on recruitment, on people development, on training courses. So, I spent more time on those kind of things. So, okay, I maybe spent more than they might justify if you literally looked at how much time did I spend on that on my day-to-day job. So it's really about thinking, what am I going to include in my CV? And what is it I want to draw attention to about that? And what does that give me in terms of the overall message that I'm communicating about my CV? So, if you've got lots of different jobs, maybe in a particular sector, you could, and you think, well, actually that experience has developed some core skills, and I'd like to mention that. So maybe you could group all those work experiences together. Maybe say, I don't know, from 2014 to 2018, I had a variety of roles in this sector, including this job, working for this employer. Through this range of experiences, I developed core skills. I have expertise in this, or I developed transferable skills in this. So you don't have to go through. Otherwise, you can end up with quite a repetitive CV where you just repeat yourself from job to job. Rather than thinking, well, actually, for this role, what is the most important? And I think generally what you'll find is that, the things that are longer ago, they might have been superseded by the new things that you've done. Particularly if you've done the same thing, but just in more depth at a higher level, then obviously you don't need to say so much about it from the past. For very technical roles, sometimes there will be some very core technical skills. For example, I know you can do Python, or you can do C++, you can do Java. And for that particular employer, whether it's in academia or outside, they really want to know you've got those core skills before they want to move on. So I think it can be helpful to have a technical skills, experimental skills, IT skills up front in your CV if you know that's really important to that employer. Okay. So it's really just thinking, if I was an employer, and I was looking for someone, what am I really looking for? I'm looking for someone who's excellent technically, and then I'm looking for someone who's good with clients, and then I'm looking for someone who can manage a project, and making sure that you order your CV in a way that will show off what they're looking for. So it's just being very tuned into, okay, if I was the employer, how would I look at this? And what a tip I'd give would be to say that, when you think you've finished your CV, put it down, sleep on it, because you will wake up at 4 a.m. and think, I forgot to mention this. Then go back to your CV, get the job description in front of you, put your employer's hat on and think, okay, I'm shortlisting for this job. Can I find the key things I'm looking for? And are they roughly in the order that I'm kind of looking for them in terms of importance and in the kind of depth that I'm looking for? Basically, would you shortlist yourself for this job?
Thanks very much, Louise. I think this comes back to these CV conventions. We're often asked for, is there a template that you can use for your CV? The problem is that you can give somebody a standard template, but it may not help you tell your story effectively. So you have to be able to think from the employer's point of view, what bits of what I've done in my life would really grab their attention, and find ways of moving those up further and further up to the top of your CV, to exactly as you're saying, Louise. Okay, we don't have a very long to go. So Holly, there was one which came in about how do you avoid using cliches in your CV? So
Yeah.
a couple of minutes on that before we start to draw to a conclusion.
I was really glad somebody asked this, because my favourite question is, what do I not put on my CV? How do I not do it? So I really liked that question about how do I avoid being cliche? And I've got a couple of things to share on that. So here's the first one. I hope. Oh dear. Okay, here we go. So this is an example from the start of a CV. So we've already talked a lot about the CV being an advertisement. Whenever you're asking questions about a CV, if you replace the word CV with advertisement, I think that can really just help you to get in the right mindset. And some people like to use a personal profile to start their CV. I've seen some interesting research that maps how the eye looks at a CV. And in Western countries where we read from left to right, the eye tends to scan in a kind of F shape. So whatever's kind of at the top where the bar of the F would be, they'd see first. So some people like to start their CV with a personal profile, kind of summing up who they are. And I see a lot of things like this. Highly motivated, hardworking PhD who works well in a team, looking for a job with excellent training where I can develop my full potential. I say to people, if I had £1 for every time I read the words highly motivated and hardworking, I wouldn't need to do this job. That's the reason. It makes you blend in. It doesn't make you stand out. It's general, and there isn't any evidence given for it there. And it's kind of, it's given that you've done a PhD, you are going to be hardworking. So instead of that, really think about being tailored and targeted as well. Your enthusiasm should come through, but you can show your enthusiasm by being well researched and being specific, rather than making general claims about yourself. So in the second one here, you can see this person's really tailored it, and they've said who they are. They're a PhD graduate. They've highlighted a couple of skills that are essential to the job that they have: communication, peer review experience, and understanding of HE. They've said how they've got them: 4 years experience in doctoral research and teaching. And then they've been really specific about their career goal. And I think that just conveys that enthusiasm and interest without using those cliche terms. And then another way to avoid this is in your CV, is when you move into the bullet points in a CV, I see a lot of things like this. Just kind of telling that you have skills, and that's nice, but it's like, well, really, instead of telling the employer, show them. So a way that you avoid cliche buzzwords and just saying that you have skills is to use specific examples to give evidence of those skills instead. So rather than just saying you have excellent communication skills, back that up with an interesting example that makes you unique. So here we've got someone who said they've adapted research on the psychology of language learning for school children, demonstrating strong verbal communication skills. That's much more specific and much more interesting. So I think those are a couple of ways of avoiding those cliche and general ways of expressing your experience.
Okay, thanks, Holly. That's great. It's actually great to see it demonstrated, because it's quite hard to just explain to somebody without showing them. So we've got a couple of minutes left. So I think maybe just some final comments, the occasional top tip for CVs, probably based on all the many CVs that I know that the three of us have seen over the years in trying to support our researchers. So Louise, do you want to come up with a final comment on top tips for CVs?
Okay, yeah. So a top tip that I think is important, actually, whether you're thinking about the CV for academic careers or for non-academic careers. Actually, I hate that word non-academic, because should we say outside? They're not non-academic, outside academia. Which is just don't assume people know why you've done your research or why it's important. So I think it'd be really helpful to give, particularly if you're looking outside, but I think in any case, what is the field that you're contributing to, what are the key gaps, and particularly what contribution has your work played, and what contribution have you made to improving the field or the research community or the methods. So, you know, really emphasize why is your research important, you know, and what contributions have you actually made. And so, you know, you might talk about the methods and so on, but really at the end of the day, everyone really wants to know, is this research important, and have you done a good job of it?
Okay, thanks. Holly, final comment?
Yeah, I think mine goes back to what we've talked about, echoing the right language and keywords. So my top takeaway tip would be to give yourself an idea of whether you've done a good job with your CV or not. Go through the job description, go through the person specification, and also if you're applying for a postdoc, don't be afraid to get in touch with the PI and ask for the protocol of the study, or something like that, because that can then emphasize the methodologies and the techniques they're looking for. So highlight all the key skills, techniques, methods, and then do a Control and F search in your CV for all of them. And ideally, results should pop up. If they don't, then they're not going to be able to shortlist you, because they're going to have a matrix in front of them with all of those things on, and you need to tick off as many of those as you can. So I would say Control and F search for all of the key things they're looking for. Or if you're a visual person, put the job description into a word cloud app, put your CV into a word cloud app, and make sure the same words are showing up in big text, because that will show you that you are speaking their language and you're emphasizing the right things.
Okay, I think my final tip from on CVs, which may be a little counterintuitive for CVs, is I've actually seen some truly shocking academic CVs from early career academics who actually got the jobs. And I looked at them and think, how on earth did you get a job with a CV which is formatted like this? Instead of just focusing just on polishing the formatting of your CV and so on, a lot of it is about getting your work known. And I think that point you made, Holly, about getting in touch with academics who are recruiting to find out what they're using, getting your work known, still engaging with academics virtually during this time, obviously. Having your personal reputation and being known for your work can overcome an awful lot of CV sins. And then it's more about, okay, do they know that you can do really good work? And that's the way to get invited to interview. Okay, so I think from all of us, one of the things we'd like to just reinforce is that if you're currently at a university, you've possibly got access to your career service or to career support, maybe from within your faculties, within your university. So please do use us. Most of us are supporting people online, and we'd love to be able to help and support you in this quite tricky time. Other than that, hope you have some amazing CVs, get your applications in, and good luck with your career wherever it's going to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good luck, everyone. Bye.